Hello, my name is Amy McKnight, and in 1998, I was living in Indianapolis. 21 years ago, I opened my door and let in a rapist. That statement alone has caused me so much anger and self-hatred. I opened the door. Nothing warned me something might be wrong, that I should be careful, that people are not to be trusted, or that the person on the other side of the door was someone who wished me harm. How stupid I was to open that door. And what was wrong with my intuition, my spidey sense, that feminine intuition we're supposed to have? How would I ever feel safe again if I couldn't trust myself? And how do you rebuild yourself when you don't really believe you can? After this incident, I experienced the feeling of a veil being lifted, that now I could see all the evil that could happen, all the bad things potentially lurking out there in the world. A man in a long coat could pull out a rifle and start shooting. A repairman working in the basement could come running up the stairs and hold us all hostage. Everywhere I looked, a seemingly normal situation could easily go so very wrong. I became fearful and untrusting and kept to myself. I stayed with my boyfriend for a few weeks and then moved into a studio apartment in a secure high-rise building downtown. I could see the whole apartment from my bed, and that made me feel safe. Although I had been working towards an MS degree prior to the rape, I got a job as a secretary because that was all I felt I could manage. I married a bookish man that I met there. He was kind and unassuming, and I felt that if sex could be so badly used against me, maybe I didn't really want it in my life. There were and still are so many triggers that set me off. A man walking too close behind me still frightens me. Male dentists, doctors, eye doctors, they make me apprehensive, as you could end up in a vulnerable situation alone with a strange man. For years, the smell of his cologne, we finally discovered it was black suede, could sneak up on me and leave my heart racing. I continue to be hyper aware of any situation where I might be alone with a strange man in an enclosed space. Repairmen in my house, elevators, walking to my car in a garage. After about 10 years, I realized I had cut off an important part of my being, and I divorced my husband and moved to the state where I had been born, where my parents lived. I was ready to move past the choices I had made out of fear and start again, hopefully a little more whole. I live in a small city now, but I remain hypervigilant about my surroundings. I remarried and miraculously had a baby at 44. I experienced postpartum depression in the first 6 months and found a wonderful counselor who supported me. Just 5 years ago, I remember talking about the rape and weeping and talking about how I felt it had all been my fault. Her clarity that it was absolutely not my fault, and her insistence that I had to stop carrying that burden, not just for me, but now for my daughter, helped me in so many ways. We began to work through all those feelings, and I felt that finally I was beginning to put it behind me. I went back to school to pursue an associate's degree in accounting, hoping I could get out of low-level administrative work and help to better support our family. And then there was another knock on my door. This time there were 2 policemen who informed me that a detective had been trying to reach me regarding an old case. They gave me her contact information and left me there stunned, with a 2-year-old needing my attention. I called the detective, and she told me they had DNA evidence and asked if I wanted to pursue the case. After losing so many years of my life to fear, guilt, and shame, I absolutely wanted to pursue the case. This stranger who had lied to get into my home, then raped, sodomized, and tried to kill me had been walking free all these years, believing he'd gotten away with what he'd done. There are too many stories of rapists going free or getting minuscule sentences, and I had new hope for some justice, even after all this time. It's my belief that if the backlog of rape kits that have sat untouched for years begin to be examined, there will be other victims of this man. It's impossible to believe he did this once, got away with it, and stopped there. But reopening the case also reopened all my fears, as well as a huge bubbling up of anger. Rehashing the whole incident, trying to recall horrific details, I felt so angry again at myself, at the system, at my whole life being turned upside down once more. I had done everything right at the time. We called the police immediately. We had a rape kit done at the hospital. I gave the police a statement and even attempted a computerized sketch of this man, and nothing happened. I never heard a single word from the male detective, and I felt at the time that he had not even believed me. It's hard to understand why anyone would think a woman would lie about such a thing. Why would I go to the police, to the hospital, file a statement, see a counselor for years if I was making a story up? Aren't the police supposed to be protecting us from criminals? Isn't cutting off someone's clothing with a knife and raping them at gunpoint a crime? Now I know that he did indeed live in my apartment complex. He was actually a neighbor, as he had said, and as I had told the police. How could he not have been found at that time? I would have recognized him immediately and he would have gone to jail. All this anger bubbling up caused trouble for me at home with my daughter. If she grabbed at me or licked me or held me so I couldn't move, I would be overwhelmed with anger. My husband and I went to family counseling to try to work through these triggers so I could be better with my daughter, and I continued to work with my counselor. As the case progressed and we met with roadblocks with the chain of custody of the clothing that had his DNA on it, when the detective told me he had said it had been consensual, waves of anger and helplessness would roll through me. When would I stop being a victim of what this man had done to me? So when this amazing detective finally told me that the prosecutors had accepted my case and this man was in custody, I was ecstatic. Finally, I could put this behind me. But then we had another 18 months of holding on to the details so I wouldn't forget. Every month a new trial date and every month a continuation. Every month trying to figure out logistics of getting to Indianapolis, if my husband could go with me, and what we would do with my daughter. But finally, it feels that it will all be worth it. I thought my heart was going to explode as we sat in that courtroom and waited for the jury to give us their verdict. I wept when they said guilty on both counts. I could hardly believe it was over, that I had been believed and that justice had caught up to me after more than 20 years. Unbelievable. The hugs and love from every member of that jury was an overwhelmingly healing experience. Those jurors were young, old, male, female, black, white, blue collar, white collar, didn't matter. They believed me, and they unanimously found him guilty in just 40 minutes. Astounding. I will be eternally grateful to the detective and prosecutors, all female, who believed me and pushed to put this man in prison where he belongs. Maybe one day soon it won't just be women who believe us when we say a crime has been committed. For me, this is an amazing end to a terrible event in my life. But in the rape culture we live in, this is just one drop in a bucket in the movement to change the way our system works and how it fails women who have been abused, assaulted, and dehumanized. In the course of the above years, I've contacted the FBI, the Joyful Heart Foundation, both Indiana and Wisconsin sexual assault support organizations, a retired prosecutor in Wisconsin who specialized in DNA cases, and many others. I was met by overwhelming support from all of these contacts, and each one encouraged me to keep fighting. After sentencing, I will be getting back in touch with all of these wonderful individuals who gave me advice, contacts, and their belief in my story. It's my hope that this story might encourage others to share their stories, to report crimes that have been committed, and to continue to fight for our rights and the respect that each and every one of us deserve as human beings. Thank you for your time in reading this and for your consideration of my story in the sentencing.